Good morning. Today is what is it? It's the 13th. Actually, here it's already the 14th day of Kislev. And it is the 26th of November. We are starting a new parsha, Parashat Vayishlach, in which we get the big showdown between Jacob and his twin brother Esau. And it starts off with Jacob sending angels. Rashi writes that these are actual angels. It's a big deal why it is this way. Won't get into it today probably. He sends them to Esau to try to make peace with him, since he is now coming back after being 20 years in Haran, in Laban's house. He's coming back to the land of Canaan, and he knows that he's going to meet him. He knows he needs to make good with him, and he tries to alleviate his anger. And so he sends emissaries to talk to him. Now, if you know Hebrew, there are three parashot, three Torah portions, whose name stems from the same root, to send. To send is not just to send. It also means, specifically in Hebrew, it means to send an emissary, someone who is in your place. The three parashot are Vayishlach, our parsha this week, Bishalach, which is when Paro sends the people out of Egypt, and finally Shlach, when Moses sends the spies to see the land of Israel, and hoping that they will bring back a good report, and it will all turn out well, but that didn't work out so well. So these three parashot, they have something in common, and each time someone is sending emissaries. It doesn't sound exactly like the Jewish people are Pharaoh's emissaries, but we'll see in a moment that it's connected to the same theme. So the first thing to learn is what is the relationship between these three incidents of Jacob sending his emissaries, Paro sending the Jewish people, the Israelites, and Moses sending the spies. So the relationship between them is that everything follows the inception, and the inception here is that it's coming to bring compassion into the world. It's like saying a principle. Whenever you send someone, send them from a place of compassion. Send them from a place where you have compassion on them, and you also want them to distribute more compassion into the world. How does this work? So the idea is simple, that we start with Jacob. Jacob himself, he is the sphera of Tiferet. He's a sphera of beauty, whose inner experience is compassion. And so Jacob, certainly, that's what he wants to do here. He wants to be compassionate on his brother. He wants to have compassion on him. He wants to also have compassion on his children, on his wives, that nobody should get hurt, and so on. So everybody that he's sending with the purpose of compassion. Pharaoh, you don't usually think about him as being compassionate. But Pharaoh represents a lot more than just the king of Egypt. In Kabbalah, Pharaoh represents the crown. Every king represents the crown. Avimelech, that we saw last week, he represents the crown. The 12 kings the 7 kings of Edom that we're going to meet at the end of this parsha, in the 7th reading. We might not get to it, but in the 7th reading we have the 7 kings of Edom. They represent the crown. The crown in this case is the crown which is chaotic. The crown, we always say, is dark. It's because it's unconscious, it's superconscious, it's above our consciousness that it is chaotic, it is not orderly, and so the crown can be disorder. In Pharaoh's case, the crown represents what the Zohar calls the source of all energy. Minei mitbarin kulhu nehorin. All the lights, all the energies, all the revelations of godliness actually come from Pharaoh, which is a very strange thing to say, because what are we saying here? But it's like saying that to bring the Jewish people out of Pharaoh's grip means to take them through a process of limitation, that when they're in the crown, they're completely beyond this world. They're not in this world, really. In a certain sense, you could say that when they were in bondage in Egypt, it was like they were bound, and we even describe it this way, like the bounding state of what we saw last week, the flocks that were akudim, all the lights within one vessel. It's a state in which, if you're ever held this way as a hostage or held in bondage or anything like that, where you feel that all your lights, all your energy, everything that you are, everything that you could express is locked together into one place. You can't get it out. And Pharaoh is the source which holds that together. It's like he has everything in him. To get him to release, and the same thing as saying you release all the powers that are within you. There's even a statement like this about Rav Chaim Vital, the great student of the Arizal of Rabbi Isaac Luria, who wrote down the Kabbalah from Rabbi Isaac Luria, that he was bound in the beginning of his marriage. And what we mean by he was bound, it says this in his autobiography, or the biography that was written as an autobiography about him, was that he wasn't able to consecrate his marriage. He was bound. He was locked into himself. He couldn't express himself. So this whole thing of being bound is what Pharaoh allows you to do by releasing you. It's like he releases all your energy, he releases all of your powers of expression. So what are we saying here? That from feelings of compassion, you actually have to awaken higher compassion. It's not enough that the compassion comes from you. The compassion has to come from higher up. Meaning when I send someone on a mission, I'm not just doing it because I have compassion. I'm trying to connect to the fact that God has compassion for the world, and this mission that I'm sending him on has to be something that is good for the entire world. It's not just good for me, it's not just good for the person I'm sending. Finally, it reaches Moses. Moses is the third parsha, Shlach, where he's sending his spies. And what Moses is trying to do is he's trying to take the compassion and move it through his da'at. His da'at is his consciousness. Moses is always da'at. And what that means is that when compassion begins to come down, it begins to be revealed, it has to be in such a state that there is conscious decision who to give the compassion to and who not to. In other words, if you're following the morning classes, we talked about this, that a person is not allowed to have compassion on someone who himself is not conscious of that compassion, because they will understand it the wrong way. They will understand it as weakness. They will understand it as there being no judgment in the world, that you can do whatever you want, everything goes. And that certainly is true after things come out of Pharaoh, out of the bondage, and suddenly everything is released. There's a feeling that everything is possible. So that's one of the things that we can get out of this, that these three parashot, these three portions that have this root shlach, are related as a process. But the most important thing to know about what happened here was that none of these missions worked. None of them succeeded. Jacob sends messengers to his brother Esau. They come back and they say, we failed. He's coming at you with 400 men. He wants to fight. We were unable to give your compassion to him. It didn't work. Pharaoh wanted to send the people, but what happened 7 days later? He chased them down and he wanted to kill them. So as much as he was ready to release everything, it didn't really work. He wasn't able to. There was something wrong with the whole process. It didn't work. With Moses, it was a complete debacle. He sent the spies, hoping that they would give a good report and convince the people that it was a good idea to go into the land of Israel and so on, even from the point of view of rational thinking. And they came back and they had only negative things to say about the land, and the whole thing backfired. It didn't work. So says Rabbi Ginsburg, from this we learn a very simple principle, which is a very important principle for life. Mitzvah bo yoter mi bishlucho. It is more of a mitzvah to do what needs to be done yourself, rather than try to get others to do it for you. In other words, whatever you need to do it yourself. Don't leave it up to other people. Try to do it yourself. How do we see this? Well, Jacob had no choice. He had to go and meet Esau himself. And the way that he showed the compassion, the way that he made peace with him, the way that he got over Esau's hatred was that he bowed down to him 7 times. And when he gave Esau that honor, only he could give it himself directly. Esau was placated and the anger was gone. When Pharaoh wanted to send the people out, but we see that he can't, in the end there was no other choice. God had to take them out himself, and that's what the 10 Commandments start with. I am Havaya, your God, who has taken you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. In the end, only God can do it. He can't send an emissary. He can't make Pharaoh do it. It just doesn't work. And Moses had the same conclusion. There was no way to get really what he wanted to do. Let's spend a moment about it. What Moses wanted to do really was to take his consciousness, his understanding of godliness, and implant it in the people through the spies, teaching them how to respect the physical world as a place where God can appear. That was the whole purpose of going into the land of Israel, to take all the great spiritual ideas that they had in the wilderness and to bring them down into mundane matter, into day-to-day life in the land of Israel. That's what Moses was hoping to impart and implant on the people, but that backfired. It didn't work. So Moses said, well, if this is the way it is, I can't do it by an emissary. I can't do it by an intermediate. I'm going to have to do it myself. How did he do it himself? That was actually you could look at it as a punishment, but it was also how Moses did it himself when they spent another 38 years with him in the land of Israel, in the wilderness. That's how they became conscious of Moses' understanding itself. And then they became one with him. And it says at the end of 40 years, until now, God has not given you an understanding heart, but now after 40 years that you've been with me, now you understand, meaning the generation that didn't want to go into the land of Israel was gone, and the children who had grown up for 40 years with Moses now had his consciousness. So in the end, we learn a very important lesson from this. Don't send emissaries. Do what you need to do. It's a good thing. I mean, sometimes you can't do what... this all goes back to the idea that you have to be able to do it yourself. Sometimes, like the Rebbe sending the wonderful emissaries that he sent all over the world, it was simply because the Rebbe said, I can't be everywhere at the same time. I need to send other people. In that case, there is no choice. In that case, when there is no other option, we say the things that are coerced on us are never neglectful, meaning they're never something negative. We don't do them out of we don't send an emissary in that case because we're neglectful. We do it because there's no other choice. But when there is a choice, do it yourself. When you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. That's the major lesson of the first reading of our Parsha. Thanks for joining. I hope to see you tomorrow, and we'll continue looking at this Parsha.
Beautiful. Thank you.